Hey guys, welcome back into another edition of the Nolecast here, and LSU on deck. FSU got their FCS game out of the way, but now the season truly starts. It is good to start 1-0 for the first time in like 6 or 7 years. Appreciate all of our sponsors: Tarpon Cellars, Louisiana Hot Sauce, Legendary Home Loans, Congruity HR Solutions, and Charlie Park. And we have a special guest today for a not necessarily a prediction episode. We might get one at him, we'll see, but a preview episode. Guy got drinks with at SC Media Day. Brody Miller, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. It's an honor. Appreciate ready for some football this year, man.
Probably shouldn't introduce you as guy I got drinks with at SC Media Day.
I prefer that. I am here for that.
Yeah. LSU expert from the Athletic at Brody A. Miller on Twitter. But yeah, I mean, if it was, we went to some barbecue place, didn't we? It was the
Oh man, we're terrible. I'm blanking on the name.
Fox Brothers or Heirloom.
Yes,
one
Fox
of
Brothers.
those.
Yep, that's it. Yep,
it was good. Say no free ads, but it was legit. Yeah, if you're in Atlanta, it was good barbecue. So,
great.
Am I wrong to think that Brian Kelly is just a little bit? There's more normalcy covering this team now than what you had with Orgeron the last couple of years?
No, I think that's honestly the most simple and accurate way to put it, is just normalcy, both in my day-to-day life and in just I think anyone who works in that building would tell you. You know, I think, and by the way, Ed Orgeron wasn't bad to cover. I don't want to put it that way. Like, he was pretty good with the media, all those things, but like, it's just a different world, right? Orgeron was news all the time and weirdness, and everything was kind of goofy, and a lot of kind of games being played. You know, that goes in this field sometimes. And I think with Kelly, it's a lot of what you see is what it is. And hey, here's what you're getting. And granted, this is the new coach thing, so don't overplay this, but also a lot of access we're getting right now. But again, that's the new coach thing a little bit. But still, yeah, I think normalcy is a good way to put it, just in terms of that building is run just a lot smoother. And it's more just like, here's what I expect of you. All right. If you do it, great, I'm going to let you go. And if you don't do it, I'm going to get mad at you. But like, I think a lot of both for covering him and people in that building would say, like, things are just a little straightforward and well processed and organized.
I thought last year's roster was pretty good, but maybe a little like loaded at some spots and then very thin at others. And I'm not really sure how well that staff did at overcoming some of those. When you look back and watch that offense from last year, and I promise I'm going somewhere with this, but did it, to me, it looked like they were loading up those young quarterbacks and offensive line with too much. Like there's a lot of guys running 5-man routes.
No, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And, you know, you never like to just like beat a horse when they're down, but, you know, Jake Pete's an offensive coordinator. Just the more you heard out of that year, and this was his first time being a coordinator, it was a lot very new. And also there's probably something a little even more difficult about your head coach is kind of on the hot seat going into the year, and you hire two really young coordinators. But a lot of things are he didn't really know what he was doing. He didn't know how to. He was relatively, people would say, he knew he was smart with the passing game stuff, but did not know how to marry the run concepts with the pass concepts and make it a cohesive offense. And you could see it. I mean, the best just literal tangible example is how often they would have to call timeouts before plays because they weren't ready. They didn't know what was coming in. You know, it was too much happening. There was one time they had to call a timeout after a kickoff because they had all those things. So
wait,
yeah.
Was it after a TV timeout after a kickoff?
Yes.
Because we call that a Jeff Bowden here on this show.
Yeah.
We've been doing the show for about a decade. Yeah. Timeout after TV timeout is called a Jeff Bowden.
So there were a lot of moments like that. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. The O-line offense seemed very overwhelmed. And that's why, like, even though Max Johnson didn't win the job at A&M, I'm also not making a harsh judgment on what I think of him yet, because so much was unfair on him. Pressure in his face. Nobody knew what they were doing. So yeah, I think you're right in that assessment.
So they go out this year and they attack the transfer portal really hard. Offensively, you bring in Jaden Daniels from Arizona State. You bring in Noah Kane from Penn State, who was an IMG kid. We got to see him pretty good bit down here in the state of Florida. You get Kyron Lacey and you know, coming in at receiver, Miles Frazier and Tremont Shorts on the offensive line. Are any of those guys expected to play a lot? I mean, I've been seeing Daniels, obviously. Are we wrong to presume he's the starter?
That part's tricky because I think both will genuinely play. Just Kelly's history says that. How close this is says that. But I think if I had to pick right now, I think Daniels gets the first go. But yeah, I think I actually give Kelly credit for kind of how he went about the portal. I think you've seen a lot of teams get a little literally hole patching, you know, just genuinely top heavy, like a roster built on it. And I think what Kelly did relatively smartly was realized the way Orgeron left this roster was the entire infrastructure was shot. I mean, certain roster spots had literally one scholarship player. So your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior classes were all just out of whack. So yes, he brought in a good amount of guys who are plug and play starters, right? Jarek Bernard Converse was an all Big 12 corner at Oklahoma State. Whole start this year. Miles Frazier, like you said, freshman All-American according to multiple places. He's probably going to start this year. Like you have those guys, but you also balance a lot of like, hey, redshirt freshman you really like, but that's adding depth. And so you added 16 or 15 transfers, but it wasn't all just like, in the Ole Miss way, I think is the best example of like you're trying to basically make all your starters. It was a little more big picture. But to answer your actual question, yeah, I think Noah Cain will probably be the number 2 throughout most of the season because John Emery's the main guy. But against Florida State, John Emery will be suspended, so expect Cain to be the main guy. Or Kyron Lacey, he's probably the 6th receiver because they're so deep at receiver, but they needed another guy in that age group, for example, and a good culture guy, things like that. So I think the main transfers to really watch are Bernard Converse, Mekhi Garner, and Seven Banks are probably going to compete for that second outside corner spot. Seven Banks, of course, was a preseason All-American a year ago at Ohio State, but it just has wild injury problems, so you don't know how he'll be. And then Greg Brooks is clearly the starting nickel, a 3-year starter at Arkansas, a guy you can just rely on, steady, smart. And there are probably others I'm forgetting, but honestly, those are the main ones. And I think it's fair to say, 8 of those transfers are probably more depth pieces right now than they are like, we need you. And then obviously Daniels. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. So with Daniels, if he is the starter, he's a tough read for me, Brody, because
for everyone, yeah.
Arizona State was kind of a shit show. So how do you judge what he did at Arizona State? I never was a huge fan of the kid, like as a recruiter. I thought he was fine, but maybe that was the Spencer Rattler class, right? To where
so.
It was the year after Fields and Trevor and all those guys. It was like this Elite 11 finals feels like a regional, not a national final, right? Like the guys who made it that year. That's maybe an exaggeration, but still, if he is the starter, how much of it is because of his mobility and potentially the need to use that mobility given the offensive line, just from reading your stuff, could be maybe like not one of the strengths of this team?
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think it's fair to say that, Kelly has everything they've alluded to, both him and Mike Denbrock. It's kind of been mobility is something they'd really like. And yeah, it's fair to read between the lines that if it's Daniels, which it seems to be, it's a little bit of them telling us they don't love this O-line. I don't think it's going to be a disaster, but it's not going to be great. And you kind of want somebody who can neutralize that a little bit. I think you're absolutely right. The other thing with him is I think he's the person you most often hear Kelly talk about. He manages the offense well. He runs the offense smoothly. And obviously Daniels has a lot of limitations we can get to. But just watching scrimmages, and they've given us so much access, we've watched full scrimmages, he does run that offense really smoothly. Do I trust him as much as I trust Garrett Nussmeier to make some great play downfield, throw a beautiful ball, read a defense, all that? No, I don't. But I do trust him to run that offense smoothly and efficiently in a different kind of way. So I think that's another part of it too. But to your point about the Arizona State years, yeah, it's been exhausting for me these last 9 months because it's like you could convince yourself of any argument you want to take the side of. Because freshman year, when he actually had some help, when he had great receivers and Brandon Ayuk, Frank Darby, a good O-line, a good staff even, he will look like a guy who's like a fringe Heisman candidate the next year. He looked like a star to some extent. And then both of his last 2 years, one, you have the drama surrounding everything. You can't leave that out. 2, the O-line was a mess, and he had no one to throw to. I mean, you have balls going off face masks at times. And it's like, yes, you could say he had no help, and then it got worse. Or you could say he only can be good when he has all this help. But the real thing you got to watch is, and his offense coordinator, Zach Hill, even talked on the record with me in an interview about it, like there were times where he would because he didn't have help, would just immediately take off running. He wouldn't even go through his progression for more than a second. Just go, go, go. And when he's that good of a runner, it's not like it's a flaw, but it's something that can't work in the SEC as well. So I genuinely don't know is the honest answer. But yeah, he will have more help at LSU, but he also is facing much more vicious defenses. There's so many ways it could go.
So you mentioned those receivers he did have at ASU for that 1 year. Those guys are, I think, probably still in the pros.
Yeah.
And I look at this LSU roster, and I think, ideally, if you can block it, you need to come out chucking this thing because these receivers are really freaking good. Can they block it? Should that be the optimal strategy here, given the quarterback and what you have at running back and offensive line?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I think it's the number one thing most of us are really watching in this game because, yeah, Florida State does have a good front, right? And that is going to be a challenge for them because the way I look at this O-line right now, it's like I think the floor is I think we talked about this in Atlanta too. I think the floor is a little higher than it was, a year ago, 2 years ago, really 4 of the last 5 years under Orgeron. The O-line has just been an issue. But, I think they have 8 or 9 guys they trust. They got guys they like. I think Brad Davis is a pretty good O-line coach. But I have absolutely no idea what the ceiling is in the sense that there's maybe one person who's really started football in a real way. It's, you got a true freshman at left tackle at Will Campbell, who I think is a stud and like a dude. He is beating guys like BJ Ojolari and Ollie Gay in drills, but still it's like true freshman playing major football. There's a lot of, and there's transfers you're relying on. So I think it will be okay. I don't think it'll be a strength by any means. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to find out Florida State goes down and dominates it. Yeah, that's a key chance for Florida State.
I think there's definitely a chance that both offensive lines in this game are substantially worse than what they're having to block. I look at some of this stuff. The one thing that stands out for me is that, both tackles, I don't know what Campbell, weighed in at, but he's a lean guy. Like he's not sloppy. Both of FSU's ends are really thick, like 280, 270 type stuff. So they're not like speed rush type guys. They're dudes who can set the edge type thing. So I am curious, from my perspective, if I think this FSU team has to blitz more this year. It's just kind of common sense when you lose a really good college D end, and then they also lost one to a first rounder to the Jets on the other side. I think to get pass pressure, they have to blitz more, but like it wouldn't shock me if they just play a lot of 2 deep stuff and say, hey, like the front, clean up the run. If LSU can run in a light box, we'll adjust. If not, we'll see you in the red zone.
Yeah,
type idea. What kind of you've seen the scrimmages? Can this LSU team be a good running team? Can it be an average SEC running team? What are you thinking here?
It's tough. And by the way, just to jump on what you're saying with the lines, I know we both are friends with Colin Wilson over at the Action Network. Yeah. I know he loves the first half under in this game, which I think is probably a great play. Probably not that confident, especially with Emory out, right? I think Emory is poised to finally have that breakout year I've been hearing for 4 years.
He was a stud in high school. John Emory, for our folks who don't know,
yes,
like really good running back.
5-star. And by the way, he is really good. Like he was supposed to have his breakout year last year, then was academically ineligible, and that's still lingering. I still think he's going to have that year, but anyway, I'm not that confident in the run game, and it's tough in the scrimmages to judge closely because LSU does have an elite D line, so it's like you always have to take it with a grain of salt. But still, I'm just not that confident they're going to be and especially because it looks like they're going to go with the O-line of Cam Wire at right tackle, which the one scenario I kind of loved, and this is probably way too inside baseball from what you're asking, is through much of fall, they were doing this, kind of punch you in the mouth O-line of like kind of the 5-guard thing of like Anthony Bradford, who's going to start at guard, was going to be a tackle, and Frazier was a guard. And it was like, I think that could have been really smart in a lot of ways. Get thick up there but now it looks like they're going with Cam Wire at that tackle spot, and you got 2 true tackles, and I don't know about that in the run game. So I'm not that confident that I would probably give Florida State the edge there.
Yeah,
but
I think that's
Jaden Daniels adds one guy you got to defend. So it might be way better than I'm giving it credit.
I think it's fascinating, right? I mean, if you are allowing explosive plays in this game, I think you're doing it wrong. Can you make either of these offenses consistently block, not get a holding penalty or a tackle for loss, and then make both these units, I think, execute in the red zone.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
because it's like LSU's main hope, probably, if you're right, has to probably be just get the ball in those receivers' hands on short routes and whatnot and make them make plays. And by the way, those guys can, right? Malik Neighbors, Keyshawn Bootsy, those guys are studs. But also then you're putting more pressure on Jaden Daniels to be a dialed-in, efficient passer under pressure. And, like, I don't know if he's there yet either. So it's a lot that could go wrong.
This is the best receiving core FSU is going to see this year. Like, they see a lot of really good D lines. I mean, Clemson, Miami, NC State. Like, there's a lot of people like who have pass rushers and good D tackles. I actually think like this receiving core though is assuming Keyshawn is like 100% ready to go. I read the story on the surgery stuff. Yeah. He's back to looking like he needs to be looking.
Yes, he is back to 100% good to go. I think there's still like going to be the question of like, is his confidence back to make a certain cut, all that. But yeah, no, he's back and ready.
That's going to be a problem. And Jack Betch, who's kind of he's listed as a receiver, but he got a lot of run for them last year at sort of like a hybrid, tight end type look.
No, yeah. I mean, the receiver is so many issues you could point out in this team. I think that receiving core is among the best in the SEC, where, Butte should be one of the 3 best receivers probably in the country. And then Malik Neighbors is a guy who made some just incredible highlight catches last year. And he's the guy I'd buy the most stock in right now. I mean, he's just the dude. They're moving him into that slot role to kind of make him a mismatch guy in a lot of ways. And he's the guy I think when people are doubling Butte will be dominating. And then you're right. It's like they have a dearth of so many options of terms of, Jack Bech probably might not start. And he's the guy who was probably their most trusted guy last year, where Jeray Jenkins is a really reliable outside receiver. He might start. Brian Thomas is a former top 100 recruit who's a physical freak who I think they want more consistency out of. So he might not, but he'll be in the rotation constantly. So then Bech maybe, you have so many options there to do different things too. You have your big freak guys. You have your trustworthy route runner guys. So I think it's this weird combination. And that's why part of me was like, Nussmeier might make sense in some ways, is because it's like your passing game might be your best chance of overachieving. But you also, if you go with Daniels, there's a limit on your passing game. It's this tough give and take.
Yeah, I mean, if you need to have to score 40, maybe it's Nuss. But if you think 30 gets it done,
that's the perfect way to put it, honestly. I think you're completely right. Yeah.
So am I wrong to assume here, and this is just like I look at all these teams, I do a lot of the betting content for 24/7 CBS.
Yeah.
My error bars on this offense are like wider than the screen. I think I have a decent idea of the defense will be somewhere in the range of like above average to very good.
Yeah.
Up front, are they last year when I watched them, I felt like they did not play to their talent level.
That is a accurate assessment. It was all these guys who were capable of making really good plays, but they weren't gap sound. A lot of these guys were great pass rushers, quite frankly, and weren't good run defenders. And I mean, that's almost why at some point they had no choice but to make Mason Smith a DN, which is proof of how good he is, but also like it was proof they just needed somebody to be like, can you set an edge? Like, yeah. So I think you're absolutely right about that. It was just not very disciplined. And I think that's improving with Jamar Cain, D-line coach, who everywhere he's been, the run stats and the pass rush stats have improved the next year. Arizona State, Oklahoma. Matt House is one of the smarter DCs in football, or a good one, I should say. So yeah, I do think you'll see improvement. And the thing that I think will open everything up for that D-line to, again, in the best case scenario, be the best D-line in the SEC is Mason Smith being a sophomore and being the focal point. He was a rotation guy as a freshman, but it's like Mason Smith's the guy who I believe, if it all breaks right, should be the way we talk about, I don't know, Will Anderson going into his junior year will be the way we talk about Mason Smith going into his. Like, he's a freak, 6'6", 299, can play any position. I mean, when he was playing just D tackle, his pass rush numbers were like top 3 in the country as a D tackle. Like, but it's just a freak. So, and I think that will help everyone because now you have, it'll help Gay and Ojulari on the edge so much. It'll help Jaquelin Roy, who's another possible first-round prospect in that kind of nose spot. And, if you double him, what's that going to open up? I think it'll be better, but I still want to see it, right? I still, to your exact point, want to see, like, can you actually play gap sound smart football? You're right.
Yeah, when I saw Mason Smith play last year, it was like I've seen him as a recruit a lot. I'm at all these recruiting events and whatnot. Like the guy is freaky. I didn't see him as much because he was in the COVID class, but still, the guy's really, really talented. He did seem to be in the wrong gap, wrong technique. Like pop up and would play just unreasonably high all of a sudden. How much better does he look in these scrimmages to you?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that being like, hey, you're a true freshman playing in the SEC, a D tackle, one of the few spots you're rarely going to see that.
And you got to go play Chip Kelly in one of those opening games, and he's like, well, guess what? We're going to read all these D tackles. Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of that. Everything I've gathered is like he is the guy they trust. He is the guy that like the second Kelly, not that this is the same thing, but the second Kelly was in the building, it was like Mason Smith's are, how that goes. Like you need your allies, your players you can rely on. He was immediately one of those. Jamar Cain loves him. Matt House loves him. So I don't want to like talk out of turn and pretend I know more than I do. But I think so far it seems like he is the guy they trust arguably most, next to maybe Ollie Gay.
How have they adapted to running this three down front? Like they've always, LSU to me has always been a 4-3 team. We think of Nick as a 3-down guy. But when Nick was at LSU, they were running 4-down stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so far, it's got from what I've gathered, it's getting more out of everybody. And I hate that I'm talking so positive because when we get to the secondary, I'll
it's
be
a
torching.
super talented roster.
Yeah, right. It's like when we get to the secondary, I'll be talking about the issues. But I think it gets the most out of more players, right? B.J. Ojulari is a super talent. I don't think his best is being a 4-3 D end. I think you're seeing him get more of his athleticism, seeing him drop into coverage a little, or go off the edge. I think that's going to get more out of him. I think getting that role is going to get more out of Mason Smith. I do wonder Jaquelin Roy, because he's probably a bit more of that 3 technique, I think, naturally. Now he's more of a nose. I do wonder about that, but still, you've seen him go. I've seen them go with the 2 down D tackle stuff, with the 2 stand-up ends, that allows Roy to get the best of both worlds. And at linebacker, I don't think, Mike Jones being the main cog, I don't know how good I think Mike Jones is, because he looked great at times last year and bad at times last year, but he's a really, really, really smart player that I know Matt House knows he can trust. So I think that helps as kind of being the main communicative thing. So I think that transition's gone smoothly, but there's still a lot I want to see.
In my head, I thought when Jones transferred there from Clemson, right? I knew Clemson had some studs coming up. Jones could lose his job at Clemson, and he didn't start last year.
It was weird.
I mean, he played a decent number of snaps, but then it's like, oh, this Damone Clark guy is actually really, really damn good. He made like a million tackles for them. I do have a question. This is really just out of left field. Wes Weeks was a guy that I really liked during the COVID season. But you didn't get to go see him very much because travel was limited if you work for a corporation. So, is he going to be a dude there? I thought he was a fantastic athlete who played 5 positions in high school.
He falls in the camp of those guys that they brought in kind of big picture, not just patching holes. But no, he is clearly on that second unit, and it goes a linebacker. I mean, he's going to see the field. I think there's they're in a really good setup right now at linebacker where, Jones is probably gone next year, but Greg Penn is going to be a starter, and he's a really exciting sophomore. He's back next year. Wes Weeks, they really love him. He's one of those guys. I'm not sure what his upside is. I don't know. But they just love him. You always know how those guys go. Yeah. And I think he's back. Harold Perkins will see the rotation. So that linebacker room for the future looks really good. I'm just not sure how great it's going to be this year, but Weeks will definitely see the field. And by the way, to your Mike Jones thing, it was so weird because the first part was understandable. He was transitioning from being that nickel hybrid role at Clemson to an inside linebacker. And he flat out admitted, man, I wasn't ready for SEC guys in the box just laying me out in the face. So that part made sense. But then basically Durante Jones wasn't really allowed to run his defense last year for the first 7 games or so. Orgeron was limiting what they did. And then the second Orgeron was just fired, right? Durante Jones was allowed to run what he actually wanted. And they ran more true, kind of true 3-4-4-3, actual 3 linebacker stuff. And Mike Jones came in and looked great. So it's this weird thing of maybe he was always good and what they were limited. I don't know, but he's definitely the leader of that team.
Yeah, if you break it out almost in thirds, that the LSU defense the last 3 or 4 games of the year, not including the bowl game where they only had 20 guys on the roster. That was. They played a hell of a lot better down the stretch.
They almost shut out Bama and beat them. I mean, it was wild. The last 4 games, their defense was top 3 in every SEC metric, which I don't want to overrate that because it was a lot of SEC was the cupcake game in a way. So, you have to factor that stuff in. But it was noticeable.
And they did do a really nice job against Bama. That was also the game, I think them in Arkansas, where Bama was they were so banged up on the O-line, they didn't know who the hell to play. And I was like, oh, 100%. God, they got to play this kid. I saw this kid, 10 months ago at a camp. This kid's not ready to play.
No, that's true.
In the SEC. All right. So in the secondary, I recognize a lot of these names.
Exactly.
But I read your stuff, and I'm not really sure that the performance so far in camp fully matches up to the quality of the name value here. Is that?
Yeah. No, I think it's fair. I mean, safety, they're fine, right? I think they have 3 starters at safety, really, between Major Burns is back, Jay Ward's back, who's a great player, and Joe Fuchs from Arkansas, 3-year starter. They're fine at safety. They're even fine at nickel. Greg Brooks from Arkansas is a really good player, and Sage Ryan's a former 5-star. Outside corner is it's a major question mark, because to your point, a lot of names, a lot of guys that in a vacuum, right, where everyone's healthy, everything goes magnificently. Yeah, Jarek Bernard-Converse and Sevyn Banks is actually a really good corner room, but both have been banged up at times throughout camp. Banks is still, as of a week ago, still wasn't really going in scrimmages yet. And, Jarek Bernard-Converse, obviously all Big 12, and that he's the guy they like most. There's no doubt he's starting, but even he hasn't looked necessarily great or stand outy, which, that happens sometimes when you go Big 12 to SEC, where like, again, I don't think it's going to be bad, but you're not the star you just were. And I wonder how whole transition, I think will be reliable. But that's other corner spot. It's like, I think right now it's Mekhi Garner from Louisiana is going to start. And he's a physical freak, right? 6'2", really built. But even Louisiana staffers were saying, like, we think he's probably a safety. Like, he's not quick enough to be a corner. And now he's doing that in the SEC or against Florida State. That's a huge question at outside corner. And it's like, yeah, if Banks is healthy, that's good, but he's still not ready. And if there's even one injury at outside corner, they are possibly screwed, like a McNeese walk-on Colby Richardson. Credit to him, he's done really well in camp. Like, he looks like he can actually play, but it's like the depth there is abysmal. So if one guy goes down, which is going to happen in SEC football, you're really in trouble there. And to your point, I'm not even convinced if healthy these guys are that great at corner right now, just in terms of transition from transfers, injuries. So yeah, there's a chance it works out well, but there's probably a lot more chances where that is the thing you can attack.
All right, so this may sound just crazy, but if you trust the safeties and you trust Brooks the nickel, and you think the two corners are definitely the other corner opposite, Converse is a little sketch, and you don't know that Ojulari is a good fit as a 4-3 DN. You think he's better as like a 3-4 stand up, chase the play type guy, and you have mostly bigger linebackers, I think.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Would you want to like make these guys play in a phone booth so you keep Brooks off the field? And like, or would you want to spread these guys? I almost think like, to your point, you said, will these guys play the run? We know they can rush the passer. Can they play in a phone booth where the corners are more isolated outside? That type of thing.
I think,
because then you keep your third safety off the field too.
You're saying, would LSU want to?
Like, if I was playing LSU, would I maybe think about going?
My bad.
More two tight ends or more two back stuff to make these guys play in a more traditional like phone booth type thing.
No, I think that's really smart. Actually, I think that would be a good plan against them, because it's like, I don't hate the linebackers, so you could go big and maybe hang in there, but I think that would attack kind of a weakness. I think the zig for LSU there would be, because Joe Fuchsia and Ward are both guys who are pretty good in the box. Maybe you can let those safeties get out there and, you're still probably at a mismatch, but like at least you can kind of hang and be versatile. That would be the main zig there. But no, you're right. I think if you're trying to think of a way, that's absolutely it, because you're putting pressure on those corners and you're taking off one of LSU's more reliable players. I think that's smart.
But I assume you do have more confidence in the defense than the offense, even with the secondary issues.
It's a good question. I think I have more upside. I know it's such a boring term, but yeah, because I think that D-line is a chance to be special if it comes together, as we said. Like, that is a chance to be holy crap good. So I probably agree with that. But the thing where I'm arguing with myself here, which is why I'm exhausting, is like, there's a bigger scenario where the cornerback, like the secondary, just screws them, and it's like an actual red flag. Well, there's plenty of scenarios where the offense, everything's just kind of okay, So it's like, but yeah, I think I will overall say you're right, that I have more confidence in the defense.
Last year, special teams was at times really, really good. Like, they had a great kicker.
Yeah,
but he's gone now.
Yes, he is.
Are they okay at kicker?
It's a great question.
Like, they were top 10 in the nation in like points over expected with field goals.
They've been spoiled after like a long time. LSU was terrible at kicker. 4 years of Cole Tracy and Cade York. They've been so spoiled. Yeah, I'll admit, if you sometimes, like, during practices, you'll just kind of zone out to the distant field and watch the kickers. It was like, oh, that could be rough. There are a lot of C angle kicks, I think Damian Ramos is a guy who looks like he's won that job, and I don't know if he's a guy you're going to trust to go make some 52-yarder, but he's at least the guy you can trust to make those, and those give me kicks and things like that. But no, that is not a strength that used to be. I think it's fair to say they'll probably regress pretty far to bottom half or something like that in field goal. They had Jay Bramblett, the punter from Notre Dame, who was clearly a guy, Brian Polian trust coming over from Notre Dame. I think he'll be solid. And I'm really interested to see in the return game kind of what happens, because they basically just didn't have a return game for a few years. They just kind of accepted like, hey, we're fair catching a lot of the time. Let's not mess with stuff. But I think they're going to put, Malik Neighbors, Sage Ryan, some really exciting players in those spots to do some things. So I'm curious what they do there. But to your initial question, yeah, field goal, you will see some regression, no doubt about it.
FSU had like bad punting for a couple years, and then they finally had a pretty nice punting year last year, and the kid is back. The field goal kicker kind of in the same spot. It's not really something that you're not a whole lot of trust in, basically. So that'll be.
Which again, first half under, baby.
Yeah, first half under. I agree with you on that. This thing could just go so many different ways. Really could. And like Denbrock has faced off before against Fuller.
Oh wow.
So I be interested to see. I'll be looking. Go back and watch a couple of those. I'm curious to see. And we know like Norvell has never faced off against Kelly, I don't think, because Brian was already gone from Cincinnati by the time Mike got to Memphis.
No,
but he has faced him in Tallahassee last year.
Oh, my bad. Yeah.
I guess I was just thinking back to
like you of all people should know.
Right. No. But last year's offense was just, it was terrible. They were
it's hard to use that as an actual data point. Yeah.
Right. And Notre Dame's like their whole offensive line got hurt by the second quarter. Yeah. So it was like, oh, hey, block a couple first rounders in the D line with.
It's kind of a throw it out. Yeah. No, this game is going to be. I think you're probably in a very similar boat when people are constantly asking you, and it's like anyone who pretends they like are really strongly predicting what's going to happen. That means that's the person you shouldn't listen to, because these are two teams that, I mean, Florida State's probably more easy to figure out what they're going to be, but LSU, you have no idea what it's going to be. And there's a lot of comps to LSU UCLA last year where Florida State's in that similar boat of, if you look at the record last year, you're like, oh, Florida State, you should win that. Or like UCLA, you should win that. But if you look closely, they were a team that, tell me if you think I'm wrong, looked like Florida State was turning a corner and fighting harder and doing some things. It's like, that's very similar to UCLA. And you have a week 0 game, very similar to UCLA. So there's a lot. You're both top 10 in returning production by ESPN's metric. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff that makes you think like, man, Florida State might be more ready, even if LSU's more talented.
Yeah, I agree with definitely with some of that. UCLA was one of my absolute best bets last year. I had them first quarter, first half. I had them like a lot on the alternate line for a UCLA blowing out of like 9-1 type stuff. I mean, it was like, man, LSU's D line does not play the run. Like they're not gap sound at all. They got young kids who are talented on the inside. Chip Kelly's going to abuse that. Like they're not going to play this right. It's an early game. Not really sure I trust this coaching staff right now. Give it all the turnover that they do, despite some people in the program telling me otherwise. That I thought there was maybe some upheaval going on there.
Yeah, you were correct. I drank the Kool-Aid a little. That's why this year I'm refusing to be like a hype. Like, you know what, Kelly's going to do great, because I'm like 2 years in a row I yada so many LSU issues by being like, but they're just the talent and all that. And I'm like, not again. And granted, maybe it's going to be different when you have a grown up in the room, but it's just like, God, they were a mess.
I feel like the differences might be like FSU has had some poor injury luck so far with some of their impact transfers. So Caden Lyles, their center they brought in from Wisconsin, is done for the year. Winston Wright, their best receiver, I think, from the portal. Yeah. It took 4. And I actually, Brady, I call you Brady, excuse me. Brady, I'm sorry. I think they might have gone 4 for 4 on their transfers. Even the one kid who was like a developmental type guy, they figured would be like more of a 23 or 24 impact, has already been decent for them and like much better than they thought he would be. And he's like NFL measurable type guy. But Winston Wright got in a car crash in March. So like their best receiver and best center that they took are both not going to play in this game. Their backup center got hurt in the practice in Jacksonville. And I'm kind of doubtful. Like he's listed on the depth chart. We'll see if he actually plays type thing. And then Johnny Wilson, one of their other receiver transfers, rolled an ankle in the first series or first quarter rather against Duquesne. I think there's a pretty good chance he plays. And then another one of their centers went down in the game as well. So they had 4 guys snap the ball against Duquesne, which was kind of wild. So
it's not good.
Yeah, I think if you look at the matchups, like there are uncertainties and certainties. And like I'm relatively certain that both D lines will give the opposing offensive lines trouble, like especially if LSU's tackles don't handle size well, because like FSU is legitimately like big on the outside.
Yep.
I mean, obviously Briggs is playing DN now for FSU. He's a potentially an NFL guy. Mm-hmm. He used to be like a hybrid D tackle type. So, if they make LSU drop back a whole lot, I think that's possible. LSU should have a pretty big advantage against FSU's offensive line, and I don't love either corner room because Marion Cooper was held for precautionary reasons. The corner for FSU,
Yeah.
they're probably an NFL guy. I think long term. I think he plays, but if not, like you don't want to face LSU's receiving core if you're down, a bunch of corners. So
no, it's gonna be.
Have you done a pick on this yet?
You know what? I don't know if I actually have yet. I think it's the hardest part, right? Is like it's this dumb thing we all have to do week one. We're gonna find out because it's like if LSU shows up, if having Brian Kelly as head coach changes just the amount you can screw up, it's like I take LSU. I think LSU probably like the good version of LSU probably does win by 1 or 2 scores, but I think I take LSU, but I'm so not confident about it.
Yeah, I think from a betting perspective, you just take some alternate lines that are
that's really
juicy.
Yeah,
like there's not a whole lot of certainty as to what happens here. I don't think, and one score could be a pretty big deal. Last one for me. I know you got to run.
No, you could.
Are they doing tempo stuff?
Yes.
Like they are going tempo.
I don't think it's going to be the foundation, but I mean they have that in their package, is what I should say. Because I would assume if it's Daniels, you're probably doing a little more clock management. But that is me speculating. I will be a straight shooter. Yeah. But yes, they do have some tempo stuff in there.
Dope. Brody Miller at The Athletic, at Brody A. Miller. Man, I really appreciate you coming on. This is awesome.
Absolutely, man. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
No doubt.